Chapter 145 to 148. Hey Broly, now it's my turn, right? Mutant Roshi asked with a perverted but determined smile on his face. Yes, of course. But first, the winner of this fight is Ten Shinhan. And now, it's my turn to clean my ring, Broly said at the same time that with his mind he eliminated the flames that covered the battlefield and brought Scallion back to life, which has been disintegrated by Ten. Bang! Yep, and now get out of my property. I always wanted to say and do this, said Broly, who materialized a shotgun and began shooting at Scallion so that he would move away. And while Scallion dodged the bullets, he came to where his dwindling group was and said, "Guys, these Earthlings are stronger than they had told us, and clearly the ghost is matching us at their convenience. I think that." Bomb. "I'm tired of your excuses," Vegeta said as he continued firing his staff. "He has done it again, this guy is a monster." Krillin and Gohan shouted at the same time, very angry. Mutant Roshi murmured upon see this gloomy situation. And at this point Nappa was terrified by the actions of Prince Vegeta, who seemed to have become more tyrannical and irrational than before, so much so that for a moment he thought that this could be his destiny, and he wasn't mistaken, despite the years of service I had with him. And of course he wasn't the only one affected by that act of barbarism. "Sister," Ginger said, very scared, addressing her sister Yam for help, since she feared be the next one to suffer that fate, either in the hands of enemies, or a partner, or both. "Don't worry Ginger, he won't do that," Yam whispered to her sister at the same time she told her to move towards the new enemy. And when he saw her sister's worried face, Ginger tried to ease her suffering with her usual jovial and carefree attitude and said, "Nay-san, don't worry, I will death." But suddenly she quickly realized that this could be another unequal match. "I'll try to beat him." So they are sisters. Interesting. Ho ho ho. Mutant Roshi said, that like Ginger he also climbed into the ring, but unlike her he did it with his hands on his back, as if he were an old man. Good. After this bitter and unnecessary event that has made my work useless, we will begin the third fight between Ginger and the strongest human on the planet, the winner of many editions of the World Martial Arts Tournament, a living legend that has rejuvenated to continue fighting for the safety and justice of his world. With all of you, the incredible, the inimitable Tohermtai. The Master Mutant Roshi Itii. Broly said with great emotion and enthusiasm as if he were a WWE presenter with methamphetamine overdose. "Hey! He is stronger than those two?" asked the Science team upon see that elaborate presentation. And on the part of the Z Warriors there were also questions about that presentation. "This Broly-san. Why is this presentation so exaggerated?" Krillin asked, who didn't understand the reason, and above all that difference in treatment. "It was his request," Broly replied casually. "Hey! If there was that option, why didn't you mention it?" Krillin asked once again, angry by that omission of information that could have made his fight even more epic on television and with hat probable find a girlfriend. "Because you never asked. Besides, I don't know if you deserve it after leaving me in a bad place," Broly said, pouting as he looked in the opposite direction to Krillin's. "Are you still with that shit?" Krillin said, which was beginning to suffer a great headache. "In the ring. So you are the strongest Earthling? No one would be able to say it due to your appearance," Ginger said, which lost part of the seriousness and tragic atmosphere that she had before due to the presentation of Broly and the carefree and perv presence of Roshi. "Oh ho, young girls nowadays are very superficial," Mutant Roshi said as his eyes, covered by sunglasses, kept staring at Ginger's chest and hips. "Young girl. Don't talk like an old man when you have the same age as me," Ginger shouted furiously, self-conscious of his sister's voluptuous body and her more or less childish frame, while advancing at high speed towards Roshi to hit him with her fists. And while Mutant Roshi dodged the punches in an agile way and distanced himself from her, he said, "Oh, you are very direct. We haven't even presented ourselves properly with a handshake. Or failing this, hi." Ginger continued with the sequence of blows, which Mutant Roshi dodged and blocked once after another. This can be a minimally interesting battle, both are matched in strength and speed," said Piccolo, who gradually began to enjoy this advantageous situation and even showed some interest in witnessing a more or less even combat compared to the brutal beatings before. "It's true, but don't forget that Mutant Roshi AMA has hundreds of years of experience behind him. We can be sure that he will win and give us a fight never seen before," said Krillin, who enthusiastically defended and praised his teacher, for which expressed his greatest respect and admiration. "Incredible. I'm watching Daddy's teacher fight. Gohan said, who after hearing the great wonders that mutant Rashi was capable of was very excited for this fight. Palm. Slam. Pam. Flew. The quick confrontation Dragon Ball style where Ginger was totally on the offensive and Rashi totally on the defensive continued as before, without Ginger having been able to connect an attack successfully. Palm. Slam. Pam. Flew. And this was really bothering Ginger, who felt extremely pressured to win, so she screamed as she kept trying to hit Rashi with more fury than before, "Do you only know how to dodge like a cockroach? Attack at once." But Rashi said nothing, he kept limiting himself to dodging, deflecting, and blocking the blows of his increasingly impatient rival. Until Kia. Ginger predicted that the next blow would be blocked by mutant Rashi, therefore she increased his power by filling his fist with energy to create a deadly attack that could seriously injure his elusive enemy, that surely didn't expect her to hit so hard. But, despite being a powerful attack, it was also wide enough to dodge it. FIU. And not only dodge it, for someone as fast as the young mutant Rashi, placing himself strategically behind the opponent wasn't complicated. Shit. Yam said unconsciously to see that her sister was in a very bad situation. Whoa! Shouted in anticipation 10, Chaos, Krillin, Yamcha and Gohan upon see that great move. Brilliant strategy X old guy. It may have seemed simple, but I have realized that you have created this perfect opportunity before the fight began. You realized from the beginning of the impatient and crazy personality of that girl, that's why you asked Broly to pair you with her. And that impatience was potentiated after the deaths of her companions, either in our hands and or the ones of his tyrannical boss, since she will desperately need to win to avoid those two futures. On top of that, you used that ridiculous presentation to distract her, your annoying behavior, some sentences attacking her complexes to provoke her even more and, that way of fighting that only someone with great experience when it comes to understanding the movements of others and how to perfect your own ones know how to use. All that to make her lose her little patience and make a huge mistake. A simple attack where she concentrated all her energy to kill you, an attack that would make her completely neglect her defense. Thus creating a perfect opportunity in which even a simple attack could kill her. Opportunity that you created and took advantage of perfectly. Ha ha ha. Certainly. With age comes wisdom. Now I understand why he is so respected by that gang of idiots, and even Broly. Even I am starting to do it. Excellent. Hit the knockout to win the third match. Then it will be my turn and I will sentence the victory, Piccolo thought, which for some magical reason that only happens in the anime, had time to think about everything in the interval of time in which mutant Rashi was about to do something at super fast speed. Gaia! Shouted mutant Rashi, who directed both of his hands towards Ginger, to perform what looked like a double palm attack. Shit! Ginger thought, which was able to see for a fraction of a tenth of a second that she had fallen into his enemy's trap. But it was too late for her. Boing boing boing. Hee. Since mutant Rashi took advantage of that incredible opportunity to touching her but repeatedly with both hands in an excessively perverted way while having a small nosebleed for doing so. Ginger shouted, blushed, relieved, embarrassed, mortified and confused by this perverted turn of events. And obviously there were also certain reactions from the Z Warriors team. What the fucking hell? Piccolo shouted when he saw what Rashi had done with that brilliant opportunity, how his respect for him had vanished instantly and rethinking if really that brilliant plan had existed since the beginning. Aish! How shameful! Said Krillin, who wanted to be swallowed by the earth upon see this, and because of the possibility that the rest of the world that was watching this match related these facts to him, his apprentice. Ah! Chaos said he also felt ashamed. Mutant Rashi, Sama. Tried to say Ten Shinhan, that didn't want to expect something like that to happen. I knew, we shouldn't have let him fight a woman. Said Yamcha, who had a hunch at the beginning. Excellent movement mutant Rashi-san, it has been sublime. I didn't expect less from you, said Broly, excited to see that mutant Rashi was still the old pervert, despite having rejuvenated. Why is Kame Sennin touching that girl's ass? Is it some kind of secret technique? Gohan asked to his senseis with the tender innocence of a small child. And given that Piccolo was still emotionally affected, Broly was responsible for answering that delicate difficult to manage question. I don't know, Gohan, asked to Krillin, is his student, he should know more about this technique. Don't put this responsibility on me, Krillin replied, who, like everyone, shied away from that responsibility. And of course there were also the reactions among the scions. Indecent bastard. What the hell are you doing to my sister? Yam shouted, which was fighting the temptation to go on stage to kill that pervert. It is one thing to have a death match with someone. That's acceptable. But another very different thing is that in that fight they don't try to kill you and instead sexually abuse you without your permission, not is not. Yam. Don't intervene, if you do it we will lose. Nappa said, getting in front of her to block her advance and make her react. And as for Vegeta, he simply remained with his mouth half open while looking at the stage with cold sweat dropping his forehead, and with his left eye suffering from a nervous tic. This is no longer serious. And while the public continued perplexed by this development of events, the combat continued. Ehehe. Boing. Boing. Mutant Rashi said as he continued caressing pervertedly the perky ass of Ginger while she was still immobilized by the shock of feeling of an almost certain death, to later be sexually harassed for the first time in her life in such a sudden and unpredictable way. And as Ginger began to regain her consciousness and realized the situation in which she was, in which she continued to feel flushed, relieved, embarrassed, and confused, another emotion became evident in that cocktail, until it became the most predominant of all as Mutant Rashi kept marking her fingerprints on her until now immaculate ass. And that emotion was extreme anger. MNN. GRFFF. Growling. Darn pig. Ginger shouted with a shuddering fury as she turned to Mutant Rashi and kicked him in the face with all her strength. Plaff. And of course he flew off, crashing into one of Broly's statues, which could stop his inevitable advance towards the mountains. Aish. How painful. Shouted Mutant Rashi with a face full of blood, although the vast majority of that blood covered his before the kick. You. Perverted pig. Gross. Beast. Enemy of women. You will pay me for this. Give me back my innocence. Ginger shouted as she advanced towards Rashi with such anger and shame that even her eyes began to be clouded with tears. With such anger that it seemed that her power had increased exponentially. And of course Yem supported his sister, to the death. Kill him, Ginger. Destroy him in the most painful way possible. Kick his testicles until he have a high-pitched voice. Then simmer his. And then put an inside his. And not only her, in a magical and spontaneous way all the women on Earth who were watching the broadcast instantly turned against Mutant Rashi and asked for his head. Encouraging Ginger, the alien who had come to kill them all, to do indescribably cruel things with the man struggling to save them. Although Rashi wouldn't know that he had become the #1 female enemy within a few hours. How strange. I thought that the Scions being a warrior race wouldn't give much importance to these things or that wouldn't know the implications of what I have done. In the end it will turn out that my student is a freak among those of his own race and not the norm, Mutant Rashi thought as he took off his shattered glasses and stood up to continue fighting. Die. Perv. Ginger shouted as she charged towards her mortal enemy with her illuminated fists charged with energy, but this time without neglecting her defense and being attentive to Mutant Rashi's actions, to avoid being touched again in her ass. And when she was less than a meter from Mutant Rashi, who until now was still cleaning his blood, suddenly raised both hands in front of Ginger. Ah. No. Not here too. And due to the recent trauma caused by a very similar hand positioning, Ginger covered her modest breasts by self-reflection to prevent be desecrate her there too. But to everyone's surprise, this wasn't Mutant Rashi's intention when he raised his hands up to her modest but pretty chest. Bankoku Bikuri Sho. Bankoku Bikuri Sho. Mutant Rashi shouted to announce the use of one of his most emblematic techniques. And from his hands a wave of electric ki caught Ginger in the air, from where she could hardly move due to the innate ability to immobilize and the electric current that ran through her nervous system. Oh, amazing. And what a relief, I thought he would try something perverted again, Krillin said as he tried to regain confidence in his teacher. Perverted bastard. Let me go. Ginger said as she tried to free herself from the technique of the Mutant Rashi by shaking her body from side to side over and over again. I could do it if you give up, and give me a little kiss, Mutant Rashi said that he took advantage of his advantageous position to not only ask for surrender for the collective victory, but also to negotiate certain personal satisfactions. No. In your dreams. Let me go, scum. Ginger screamed like a scared hysteric bitch once more as she tried to squirm with more urgency than before. And Mutant Rashi obviously continued to use his immobilizing ability on his feminine enemy, who remained immobilized and electrocuted in the sky above him, struggling to free herself. And this made Mutant Rashi realize something. Oh ho! What a nice view! Mutant Rashi said, flushed and with a surprising nosebleed, which couldn't take his eyes off from under the short battle skirt that Ginger was wearing. Kaya wa. No. Stop looking. You are a pig. Men are pigs. Ginger yelled tearfully as she moved harder and faster, which made her sexier in the eyes of Mutant Rashi, seeking for her sister's help. This is a little ridiculous, said Ten Shinhan, who couldn't believe that such an absurd combat was taking place with an enemy that at first seemed so serious and bloody. This was an opinion shared by the vast majority, so much so that even her overprotective sister was becoming embarrassed with this situation. I don't understand. Ginger has always fought fiercely despite having been injured hundreds of times. She had never behaved in this way. And I have always educated her to be rude, determined, strong and insensitive to pain. That's why I have trained her so hard. Why does she behave like a scared little girl? Yam asked herself as she tried to suppress the urge to castrate and kill Rashi. I think it is due to the excessive overprotection to which you have subjected your sister since always. You have always indoctrinated her to fear these acts since she was little, and you have kept her ignorant of many things. I frankly doubt that she even knows where the children come from, said Nappa, who was beginning to remember how she indoctrinated her for years, and how she threatened Raditz, Scallion and even Nappa with death or something worse if they did or said anything improper to her. But it's because I don't want my sister to reproduce with losers like you three. I can only trust my sister to someone who is smart, handsome, good with her, brave, flawless, and strong enough to beat me. Yam yelled, revealing her overprotective sister complex that everyone but Ginger was aware of. And while Nappa was offended because he had been called a loser, Yam continued to worry about the sexual harassment suffered by his sister. As for Mutant Rashi and Ginger, doesn't a kiss seem reasonable to you? And what if I organize a bikini photo shoot? I have a camera, swimsuits and a house on the beach, said Mutant Rashi, who was still negotiating the terms of the surrender. No. Eki. Disgusting. Incestuous. Onanist. Ginger yelled as she continued to resist and insult Mutant Rashi with all the perverted log insults she knew. On the other hand, Vegeta, who had originally come here with a great superiority complex, thirst for blood and destruction, and what had gotten in its place was a great anger, humiliation and despair due to Broly's actions. But now his mind only knew the most painful, profound and indescribable vicarious shame anyone could imagine. And so he tried to express it while suffering from chronic migraine. This is no longer a combat or anything, this is a competition of mental ill retarded people, Piccolo said, who finished Vegeta's sentence simultaneously, since he also suffered the same symptoms. And this time, everyone, on all sides, unanimously agreed with the appreciation of these two villains. But neither Mutant Rashi nor Ginger noticed the vicarious shame that they generated around them and continued with their combat. Come one baby. It only hurts a little at first, said Mutant Rashi, who was continuing the negotiations, but it seemed that he was aggravating the terms with every sentence. No. I would never do that filthy with a skinny, bald dwarf. Jar. MMNNNFFFF. Hey ha ha. Ginger screamed as she stirred in the most desperate and forced way she could. No matter how much you resist, in the end you will have to give up. He 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 he. Wah 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 wah. Mutant Rashi shouted as he began to smell victory, and perhaps other benefits, as he continued to peer under Ginger's skirt. And at the same time that all the women on the planet looked traumatized at that darkly heartbreaking scene, Ginger went completely berserker and gave absolutely everything to get away of her possible dark destiny. No. 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 And that anger, virgin shame, madness and despair turned into a powerful and continuous violent explosion of energy. Ginger screamed as she continued to unleash her full power to break free of Mutant Rashi's perverted submission. What more incredible power! Regardless of appearance, they are true monsters. Yamcha said that after seeing how Mutant Rashi subdued her and her behavior as a self-conscious virgin girl who just discovered sexuality, remembered how powerful and dangerous those exterminating aliens were. Shit! Ginger! Yam shouted, since she was able to understand the precarious situation in which her sister still was, despite all the energy emanating from her body. Certainly an injured or cornered animal is very dangerous when it feels threatened. But you still won't be able to escape my Bankoku Bikuri Sho, Mutant Rashi shouted as he concentrated on maintaining his ability, without losing sight of the insides of Ginger's skirt. And despite having no hope, Ginger continued releasing energy like a broken faucet, releasing so much energy that he was creating a small typhoon around her that greatly hindered the work of the cameras, releasing so much energy that the ground around her began to crack. Releasing so much energy with such a high vibration, so high, violent, and unrefined that even she was hurting herself, releasing energy with such power that even the sturdy but old scion armor she wore began to suffer damage. Especially in the parts where the fabric was thinner, and especially those that had more friction. Strap, RRPPP, crack. Sound of fabric breaking. And one of them was, wow. Hey. Ah. Ah. Gujuj. And while Mutant Rashi continued channeling his Bankoku Bikuri Sho and looking under Ginger's skirt at the same time, something made him become incredibly deconcentrated for looking at that area. And after a few seconds of stupor, plaf. A geyser-sized nosebleed painted half a combat zone red, and obviously Mutant Rashi almost passed out from the sudden blood loss, while almost everyone else was focused on another place, apart from the emotional shock. And with this unexpected and timely event, Ginger broke free from Rashi's seal. Wow! Yamcha shouted upon seeing such a spectacle. Rashi-sama! Krillin, Chaos and Ten Shinhan shouted upon seeing the great and ridiculous damage Mutant Rashi had taken. Ginger, cover yourself. And don't look. Yam yelled upon seeing that her sister was showing her most intimate part to the whole world, while covering Vegeta's eyes gently, and as for Nappa. Ah! My eyes! Nappa yelled with great pain, since Yam had punctured his eyes with the possible intention of making him blind. And Vegeta, with his eyes covered by Yam, and without moving an inch because of how ashamed he was feeling by the situation, said, It's ridiculous. Piccolo said, who once again coincided 100% with Vegeta. Piccolo-san, that I just saw was... Gohan asked, pointing to Ginger before Piccolo hastily covered his eyes. A great fan service. Broly yelled with great enthusiasm as he put on a JoJo face. This will sell incredibly well, said one of the reporters who were watching the match, who could almost feel how his bank account begun to increase. What are you making my little one see? Group of degenerates. Chi-Chi yelled like a hysterical possessed demon while shaking the television at Kame House. And after everyone had time to react to that unexpected as well as surprising event, Ginger, who was incredibly physically and mentally exhausted, faced Mutant Rashi again. Bastard, you will pay me for this. I will. I will. Unf. Ginger cried, half crying from the humiliation she had felt while trying to put herself in combat position. Thanks. I mean, don't think that this brilliant exhibitionist strategy of breaking your own clothes has defeated me. The anemic Mutant Rashi said, covering his bloody nose at the same time he barely got up from the ground. Exhibitionist. I have no plan. MNFFMMJJJJ. Shut up. I would never undress in front of a muscleless and bald dwarf like you. Ginger screamed as she cried even louder as she explained what her fetishes were unconsciously. Ginger, what the hell are you saying? Yam said, who began to understand that her overprotection, indoctrination, together with this excuse of combat had disturbed her little sister. And without further delay, Ginger, who didn't want to get closer to Mutant Rashi for fear of his erotic touches and secret techniques, began to concentrate all the energy that was left in her body in a single point to create a powerful burst of ki to perform a powerful final ranged attack. I see. Mutant Rashi said with a very serious face at the same time that he begun to release ki from his own body. And with that ki release, his muscles from the legendary Kame Sennin inflated in an exaggerated way, thus showing a bodybuilder body that even Arnold Schwarzenegger himself would envy. What? Ginger shouted when she saw that Mutant Rashi had instantly hypertrophied, something that made her incredibly deconcentrated, but, even so, that didn't make her forget that she had to kill him with her next attack. Ha, having good muscles will not save you. Die. Raging Golden Wave. Fiam. Kemi. Gua. Mutant Rashi shouted while performing his most iconic skill and at the same time the most famous attack in anime history. Fiam. Bomb. And both ki waves collided with each other, creating the typical Dragon Ball energy attack confrontation in which both tried to gobble each other's attack and win in a final attack. Guaj. And both began with the struggle of energetic thrusts and screeching, a struggle that almost nobody didn't know when it would end. Very typical and exciting, but Mutant Rashi is the one who will win in the end. That Tsundere has spent most of her energy destroying her panties and they both have similar power, she will not win in a key endurance match. So, technically I am not going to cheat by giving back what I took from Mutant Rashi now, Broly thought at the same time that he tried to make an innocent little cheat in the middle of combat. Guaj. Damn. I hardly have any energy left and that skinny and perverted bald man, well, no. Now only bald and pervert, he's too strong. I'm sorry Nei-chan, but I'm going to die. Please, Nei-chan, don't get in trouble for me, Ginger thought heroically as she continued to look ahead and kept attacking like she always had been, a space warrior. Until something else distracted her in the body of her perverted adversary. Hey! Since when does he have hair? Ginger said, realizing that young Mutant Rashi's bald head was now covered by a thick and lush hair of a young man in his 20s, the same pampering he had at that age. Mutant Rashi has hair. They all shouted, especially Yamcha, who looked at him with great envy. And upon seeing the muscular and hairy Mutant Rashi, Ginger completely lost her concentration. And because of that Mutant Rashi won the Key Waves confrontation earlier than expected. So the Kamehame marched against Ginger without anything blocking him, creating a trail of destruction that even engulfed several mountains that were in Ginger's path. Bomb! Ginger! Yam shouted when she saw that her sister could have died. However, why? Why did you let me live? Ginger said on her knees as she stared in stupefaction at the still muscular and hairy Mutant Rashi, who was slowly and coolly approaching her. A Mutant Rashi who at the last moment deflected his deadly Kamehame so as not to kill Ginger. Why? Obviously I would feel very guilty for killing a girl as pretty as you, Mutant Rashi said badassly as he put his right hand in his pocket. K? Ginger shouted, very flushed due to that surprise comment from the now a little more attractive Mutant Rashi in her moment of greatest vulnerability. And at that moment Mutant Rashi took out a small bottle the size of a shot glass with an affixed seal which dropped to the ground. For this reason I will have to defeat you with other tactics. Mafuba. Mafuba. Mutant Rashi shouted as he focused both hands on Ginger. And Ginger as a self-reflection once again covered her secondary sexual characteristics to avoid Mutant Rashi's sexual harassment or that immobilizing technique, although this time in a more timid and maiden-like way. However, it was neither one thing nor the other, not knowing how she found herself immersed in the midst of a swirl of green energy in which she began to spin, getting smaller with every turn in the direction of the mini-container. What is this? Yam and Nappa yelled upon seeing such an extremely strange ability, even Vegeta was surprised, changing his expression from disgust to amazement. Why is he using the Mafuba? That technique can drain all the life energy or its user. Yamcha, Ten Shinhan, Krillin shouted, and above all Piccolo, who had the memories of someone who had suffered this ability in the past. What? Is it such a dangerous technique? Gohan asked, who wanted to know more about that strange ability, while also worrying about his father's teacher. But it was too late, the sealing technique had ended and Ginger had been locked in the small pot, which Mutant Rashi picked up and put in his pocket again. Mutant Rashi-sama. Why did you do that? You already won. You didn't need to risk so much to look cool. Are you okay? Krillin and the others said, that got as close as possible to the ring to see how Mutant Rashi was now and to get answers for that unnecessary action. What the hell was that? What has that insect done? Vegeta said that for the first time since he arrived on this planet he felt fear for someone other than Broly. That made him very nervous considering that unlike Broly, who was a monster born in his own race. But this one was an insignificant commoner human. An insect that until a few seconds ago was shaming his eyes, ears, mind and common sense with those perverted actions. But that incomprehensible technique was to be feared. Don't worry, Ehem. I'm fine, I'm not going to die for this. It is good to be young again, thanks to this I am full of energy. I'm going to crush you. Nappa shouted in a bravado to motivate himself and intimidate his enemy at the beginning of the combat. But that comment only made Piccolo angrier than he already was. Another idiot. Piccolo shouted as he released a bright and wide ki wave towards his opponent. Bomb. A fast, wide-range attack, but without the power to kill someone like Nappa. Fast. Nappa said, who quickly put himself on guard to stop that attack. However, this attack wasn't used with the intent to kill or injure, it was simply a distraction and a way to block Nappa's view. And in that distraction, Piccolo approached a few centimeters from Nappa and threw a punch at his neck. Clash! A punch that Nappa was barely able to block and deflect to his right with his arm. This Namekian bastard hits hard, but... You have been exposed. D. Slap. However, he didn't have time to finish his thought or attack the unprotected Piccolo, since he felt a great impact on the back of his neck, a great impact that little by little made him lose his balance and sense. Woa! His arm! Shouted the non-combatants, who could see from their perspective where that blow to Nappa's neck came from. His arm lengthened. That blow was realized by the same arm with which Piccolo attacked Nappa first. After the bald scion deflected that shot to the right, Piccolo quickly and without losing momentum lengthened and as if it were a chain tied to a weight, struck Nappa on the back of the neck with its great kinetic and elastic potential force. And before Nappa could touch the ground or completely pass out. Slash! Slash! Plash! Piccolo reached out his other arm and using it as a hypersonic sharp whip sliced the body of the almost unconscious Nappa in multiple pieces with great speed as if it were a cabbage. Thus creating a very gore scene that wouldn't be broadcast on television nowadays. Fucking progressists. Very good, Mr. Piccolo. Gohan shouted before anyone else to celebrate the victory of his substitute teacher and his second or third parental figure of reference. What was that? Those movements are not. Yamcha and Krillin shouted upon seeing those attacks that were so inconceivable and unnatural. Are not human. This is part of what I teach him, how to use his genetic advantages to his advantage. Namekians have many impressive abilities, and one of them is the ability to extend their limbs and at high speed if it's trained well. And the fact that they use this incredible ability solely to perform stupid grab attacks is a fucking waste. Extending your arms at will can become a deadly weapon into combat. With this you increase the range of your attacks and the enemy will not be able to know when, how much or how you are going to increase your attack range. And that completely destroys his rhythm, positioning ability and his conception of hand-to-hand fighting. Not only will he always catch his opponent unprepared, but he can also turn his hands into whips, greatly increasing his attack speed and power. And all this was my idea. I'm an amazing teacher, aren't I, Piccolo? Broly said to explain to the viewers what had happened at the same time that he claimed part of the victory. Yes, once you had a decent idea and you told me without imposing absurd conditions. Now shut up. Piccolo said, looking tired of saying that, as if Broly had reminded him hundreds of times before that this technique was due to him. What the hell? Vegeta shouted in astonishment, who put his tracker back on to measure Piccolo's power. This guy is different from the other three, that power, that speed, he can't be a weakling with some tricks like the others. And when the tracker measured Piccolo's power. Plash! It exploded in Vegeta's face. This can't be true. His power cannot be measured by our trackers. Vegeta yelled furiously as he destroyed what was left of the tracker with his bare hands. Does that mean that his power even without being 100% released is over 15,000 units? Yam shouted when she saw that this was going from bad to worse. What a shitty tracker you have. Frieza seems to only give you the leftovers and defective models, Broly said, disappointed that the classic scene of It's Over couldn't be repeated, but with much higher power units and with Piccolo. And seeing that Piccolo perhaps had a greater power of his made Vegeta rethink everything he had believed in until the moment of this combat. This can't be happening. I thought they only had weak people, but stronger than our weakest. That is why Broly had proposed this type of tournament, so that through convenient pairings they would win the first rounds. I thought he was doing that because they didn't have very strong fighters to face me directly. But this Namekian... Just a moment. Until now the fighting has followed the progression from weaker to stronger on his part. He has made the Namekian fight now to secure the fourth victory. Or maybe that boy is even stronger than him. Yam thought, as she looked at Gohan, the innocent half-scion boy they had so far underestimated. The boy she surely would have to fight in the next round. The winner of the fourth match is Piccolo. Therefore, of the 6 possible matches the Broly team has won 4. The Broly team should automatically be considered the winner, but as there are still individual combat awards we will continue. Damn. I have to clean up all this mess again. Broly said as if he were a housewife tired of cleaning all the mess her little children created when they play something. What kind of awards are we talking about? Vegeta asked, that despite the fury he felt for having lost this stupid tournament in which he was humiliatingly forced to participate, and that he had to continue participating in a forced way too, he still had some kind of hope, pride or motivation to win something. Even if they are forced, they must be motivated in some way. They have to have some kind of hope. It's more fun when they think they have something to gain, Broly thought while laughing internally like a real devil. Who knows, will depend mainly on the quality of the combat you have offered me and what you really want. Who knows, may I take pity on you as Science and grant you what you have come to seek. Broly said ambiguously and cheatily to reawaken the greed and hope in Vegeta and Yam. What I want. Do you really think you have the means to grant me what I want? Vegeta said arrogantly and hesitantly to Broly. But Broly did not answer him, he simply looked at him and smiled with confidence and even more arrogance than the Prince of the Scions, who had no choice but to believe his words. It was then that Yam, worried about Vegeta's expression, said, Vegeta, don't let him incite you with his promises. He just wants. I know. He just wants to awaken our greed and the fighting spirit so that he can have more fun with the following battles. There is no guarantee that he is able to give us what we want, and he will surely not keep his word if we win. This is all a game for him. But we don't have much more options than fighting as he wants. Vegeta said, who perfectly understood Broly's intentions. They couldn't negotiate, they could only play the game where they were forced to participate in the best possible way. If they refused, there would surely be catastrophic consequences for them. But if they fulfilled their role, there was still hope, not only to survive, but to get something out of this catastrophic experience. And while Yam and Vegeta had this conversation, Broly took the opportunity to bring Nappa back to life. Who did not know how he had died? What happened? Where is he? Nappa shouted, very disoriented as he looked from side to side. You have lost Nappa. Come down from there and stop embarrassing us, Vegeta said authoritatively. Wait. How did I lose? I can't accept this. What kind of cheating has he used? Nappa yelled, very furious. He couldn't believe that he had been defeated without even knowing how. Didn't you hear what I said? Vegeta yelled angrily once more, making it clear that it wasn't a request, it was an order. Wait, Vegeta, give me another chance, said Nappa, who remembered again what happened to his two other companions and began to despair and his body filled with cold sweat. You still haven't come down, Vegeta said incredibly menacingly as he indicated again that he was not obeying his orders. F.O. Forgive me, Vegeta, Nappa said, who reacted and obediently returned to lick his master's feet. And he was approaching him, when Vegeta grabbed his neck with great speed and ferocity. Vegeta, what are you doing? Nappa asked, very scared. I tried to forgive you, since you fought against someone who was far beyond you. But listening to you has made me change my mind. I don't need Scions as useless as you. Vegeta yelled as he launched his huge companion into the air and fired a powerful energy sphere to kill him. Go, Vegeta! Nappa screamed as he received that powerful attack that deformed and disintegrated him in the process. Bomb! He has done it again, that guy is a monster. Gohan yelled, very outraged to see how Vegeta treated his evil subordinates. Yes, he has done it again. PFF, GHJ. Broly said, trying not to laugh abruptly for reasons that only a true Dragon Ball fan can understand, and with this I just saw another Dragon Ball meme. I certainly did well to protect the girl with the perky ass, said Mutant Rashi while pervertly stroking the jar where ginger was contained. Vegeta. If I lose the next match, will I also become a useless and unnecessary scion? Yam asked, which until now had kept quiet with Vegeta's tyrannical actions. But now she could no longer ignore it. She fully understood that Vegeta killed Raditz, since he was a weakling who was unable to fulfill his mission, and that when he came back to life he behaved in a pathetic and unworthy way to any scion. He deeply embarrassed them. She could understand why he killed Scallion, as he was just as useless as Raditz. And she did not suffer for their deaths, since she considered them mortal enemies who tried to steal the purity of her sweet sister. But Nappa, despite his many flaws such as his lack of self-control, limited intelligence, and moderate power compared to them, he had always shown to be someone useful both on and off the battlefield, helpful and loyal, and she treated Ginger as a kind of niece, a behavior that she could tolerate and even celebrate. She couldn't understand why he had done it apart from releasing all the frustration he felt by being under Broly's total control. If Vegeta had done something like that to Nappa, what prevented him from killing her like the others? Why would she have to believe that she was special and different from the rest? Just because there was sexual tension between him and she have some feelings for him. And what would happen to her sister? Would he also consider her a useless scion for having lost her? Combat. Don't say stupid things. I would never consider you, and your sister, useless scions. Don't compare yourself to them, Vegeta said to Yam with what appeared to be moral authority and some fellowship. The next match is between Gohan and Yam. Get ready and take the stage. Broly said, cutting the conversation short for the next showdown to begin. And while Yam went up to the ring, still with doubts about Vegeta's behavior, but a little more relieved than before. Gohan had a huge stage panic attack. Aish. Aish. I'm very nervous. Ah. We have already won. I don't understand why we have to keep fighting. And I don't like fighting. Gohan shouted as he wondered like every child why he should do things that he didn't like to do, not want, or that were not excessively necessary, but still he had to do them. Before screaming. Hey, what's going on now, Gohan? Said the strict Professor Piccolo, who was about to fiercely scold his student, who had too many stupid fears and doubts before a fight. However, that scream momentarily worried him. Maybe there was something that everyone should be surprised or worried about. Now that I think about it. If I go up to the ring to fight, I will be on television. And if I fight, my mother will see me. And she will punish me. And she was already very mad at me before without even fighting. Gohan yelled as he realized the family drama that awaited him when he got home. That's what worries you. What has been of all the effort and dedication that Broly and we put in you? Stop behaving like a consented child and go up to fight. Or in addition to your mother's punishment, you will also have mine in the next training session. Piccolo shouted like a real hysterical, so much that it seemed that his head had grown in size because of how much he was screaming in a comical way. Something that scared Gohan a lot and even hurt his feelings a little despite knowing that Piccolo was partly right, but also. Egg? Will you train with me again? Why? Weren't you just training me to fight the bad scions, Piccolo-san? Gohan asked, who was able to understand a very interesting subtext in Piccolo's involuntary sentence. And Piccolo, who did not expect Gohan to point out that detail, full of shame and with a certain red color on his green cheeks, shouted again but a bit more timidly, "Shut up and go up. Later we will talk about the future training regimen." Yes. Sorry. Gohan said, who jumped quickly to get away from Piccolo, and once he got far enough away of him, he moved slower towards the ring. Did you just see the same thing as me? Yamcha said, who couldn't believe that would ever see that attitude in which until this saga was the greatest threat in this world. Was that really Piccolo? Mutant Rashi said, since he could not believe the reincarnation of the greatest evil on this planet, for which his teacher gave his life to seal, would have said, done, and expressed what they had just seen. Has he blushed? Krillin said, highlighting that embarrassing detail above all else. And Piccolo dear, upon hearing those comments with his super ears, shouted to hide his embarrassment, "What are you looking at? Mind your own business." And while that funny gag was taking place, Gohan was moving very slowly on stage, trying to delay as much as possible that fight. Until... Splash! Broly appeared behind the crestfallen and slapped him with his open hand on the back with great force, so much so that he left a red mark with the contour of his hand. Why did you do that, Broly-sensei? It hurts so much. Gohan yelled at his sensei as he complained for obvious reasons. I saw you a little asleep and I thought you needed some of my help to wake up, Broly replied jokingly without feeling guilty at all. There are other ways to wake up someone. Yuch. It hurts. Gohan replied very indignantly as he tried to lessen the pain he felt in his back, rubbing it. What is troubling you, little one? Broly asked, now more serious than before, since he knew that his student had a strong moral dilemma. Broly-sensei. Why do I have to fight? Our team has already won, and since they have seen how strong you are, they have wanted to flee from the planet. And even if you had not organized this tournament, I am very sure that between all of us and Dad we could have made them run away. He forgot that Yamcha died. It doesn't make sense that we have to keep fighting. In this way we will only continue to harm ourselves foolishly. The peaceful Gohan said, expressing his deepest thoughts and doubts to his favorite teacher, from Broly's perspective. Yes, I know. Precisely for this reason I put you in 5th place to fight. Because I knew that before it was your turn we would have mathematically won this tournament. All this was part of my plan, the calculating Broly answered quite naturally, as if he did not care about Gohan's feelings. Hey! why did you do that? Shouted Gohan, who did not understand why Broly had manipulated the tournament in this way. At the same time he felt used, like all the others now. Tell me Gohan, why did you decide to train with me to beat these bad guys? Broly asked in a Socratic way. And Gohan, who tried to remember, quickly replied, it was to protect my loved ones from those who wanted to harm them. Exactly, that's why we were training. Broly replied, satisfied with his student's answer. And for this reason I have organized this combat. Because I wanted to check what you would do when it was not necessary to fight for the safety of your loved ones. And see how far you could hesitate. Although it is not something that has been achieved thanks to you, I must add. Said Broly, who was beginning to act in a mysterious way, like a very ambiguous and enigmatic Orthodox Jedi Knight. And realizing what Broly was trying to do, Gohan got really mad at him, but in less than a second he lowered his head and directed that anger at himself. I see, it's another test. I guess now you will tell me as Piccolo that you are disappointed with my attitude. That I am being a spoiled child. That I am not. But Broly quickly interrupted his self-scorn. I know you Gohan, at least well enough to know that you do not like to fight or harm others, and that with great difficulty and with doubts you would only do it to protect your loved ones, and that only if you have been motivated enough by the circumstances. That is something admirable. However, we cannot always choose our battles. And those battles will not always be to protect our loved ones. But even so we cannot look back and ignore them, since doing so could hurt someone, especially ourselves. And if you hesitate too much between fighting or not, you risk being destroyed before you can put yourself on guard. And this is in all facets of our life. And with every word he heard from his now profound teacher, Gohan understood less what he meant with this speech. I don't get it very well, Broly Senior. I know, otherwise it would not be a test. You have to find out for yourself, Broly said once again in an irritatingly ambiguous way. What happens if I don't understand it? What happens if I do it wrong? Gohan said, which aside from feeling confused and uncomfortable for having to do something he did not like, also have the expectations of his teacher, which he did not know how to please. There is no 100% correct answer on this test. This test is only existing to verify what kind of person you are currently. And from what you have learned from this victory or failure, whatever you think it has been, you can decide what to be in the future. Don't try to please me, or Piccolo, or your mother, or your father, or the world. Just try to be indebted to yourself. Do what you know is right. But always looking forward, fearlessly. You can't just do nothing every time problems knock on your door. But I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it, Broly said once more, sometimes putting the same voice as Master Yoda unconsciously. And sometimes the voice of Morpheus from the Matrix, which confused everybody. And after a few seconds in which Gohan's young and inexperienced mind tried to understand something that was possibly too advanced for him, a test totally different from now. A test where he did not have to achieve a solid goal and prefixed by his teachers. Gohan raised his head and looked at his teacher and decisively said without fully knowing what it meant, I'll try Broly Senior. I will open that door in the best way I can. Perfect. I'm glad to hear that. Would you like another pat on the back to give you good luck? Broly said, joking again to relax Gohan's mind a bit after the complex or maybe absurd speech. This. Better not. Gohan said, running towards the center of the ring to have his blissful almost rigged fight. A match that would mark Gohan's life from now on. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.